let's move on to the next session by Associate Professor Becky Freeman and her team. She is Associate Professor in Public Health from University of Sydney. Research interest in tobacco control and media and communications. I believe that she is in right now. Dr. Freeman?
Yes, I'm
Hello?
Hi. Hello.
Hi, I think I can hear someone say hello. I can't see that person yet. Oh, hi.
Hi.
Hi, Dr. Freeman. Nice to meet you. My name is Anutai Sunsawat. I am the host today.
You as well.
Where are you right now? Are you in New Zealand or Australia?
I am in New Zealand, but I work in Australia, which has been a bit difficult over the past 18 months, seeing as we can't go back and forth. But everyone is obviously working from home, so I could be anywhere in the world, really.
Global citizen, that we all are, right? Okay, and I believe that you and your team will have lots and lots of information, exciting details, and information about how do we tackle this tobacco use problem. From 1 hour, and before I go away, are we having any break in between, or what's going to happen in your plan?
So the schedule I was sent was a 45-minute session, and then a break for lunch, and then another hour-long session.
Okay, that's good. Because we have people from around the world, and it's not lunchtime for everyone.
That's true.
But it's lunchtime for me, so please. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, this is Associate Professor Becky Freeman. Please take us away.
Great. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay. All right, can everyone see those slides, or can someone give a thumbs up or something just so I can
do that. We can see that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. In this session today, I'm going to be presenting alongside my colleague, Dr. Christina Watts, who recently completed her PhD on tobacco industry interference in tobacco control in all sorts of ways. So she's a fresh graduate with fresh ideas. So I thought it would be really great to have her alongside me today as well. And I've been researching the tobacco industry for the past 20 years now. It's been my career, my focus, my passion. And you'll find that a lot of you, if any of you are new to tobacco control, I have to warn you that once you get started in it, you do get quite addicted to it. It's just like nicotine. You'll want to keep going and keep getting involved. So consider yourself warned about that. We're going to focus on this first 45 minutes about how the tobacco industry is using social media. And then, like I said, there'll be the break. And then we'll come back and talk about how the good guys, the public health, the tobacco control people could be using social media and give you some examples of that. But before we do that, I know you're all, this is a youth audience, so you're all very tech savvy, social media savvy, but let's just make sure we're all on the same page here about what social media is and what it's for. So social media, what is the goal of social media? Have a think inside. You can shout out loud if you want or type in the chat. I'm very happy for that. But think to yourself, what's the goal of social media platforms? What is it that they're trying to do? And some of you are probably thinking like, oh, connect and engage and share. And those are all very great, lofty goals. But the actual goal is to get you on the sites for as long as possible, for as often as possible. That's what their goal is. And when you think about some of your own use, imagine lots of you have these in your hands right now while I'm talking to you, which is fine. I don't mind. Use your screen. Watch this screen. You're young. You're good at multitasking. How many times a day do you log on to your favorite social media platform? Once, 10, 100 times? And how long do you stay on there? Do you sometimes find yourself scrolling through? Do you get those dreaded social media reports once a week about how much your time is and go, I can't believe I spend that much time online? And that's the goal. Why? Why would they want you to be on the sites for as often as possible for as long as possible? Think about that. And how do they do this? How do they get you on the site as often as possible for as long as possible? Well, you need to really enjoy it, obviously, or feel that you need it, right? I know some people are going to say that they're addicted to social media, or you have to really fear you're going to miss out on something if you don't log on, right? So every time you get on there, you've got to really enjoy yourself on there, feel you're missing out if you're not there. Why do they do this? Why do they want you on the site as long as possible, as often as possible? Why on earth is that important to these platforms? It's so you're exposed to as much advertising as possible. And that might seem like a cynical answer. Obviously, we all really enjoy social media for the pictures of our friends and the places people are going and the great information. Particularly, obviously, it's been probably said multiple times during COVID. I mean, we rely on that for human interaction, for socializing. We would be kind of lost without it. And thank goodness this didn't happen to us before the advent of social media. It would have been even more difficult than it already is. But the only way the platforms make money is if you engage with advertising. Because no one's ever paid here for an Instagram account, right? You've never paid for a Facebook account. And this isn't a problem necessarily. Some advertising is quite useful. I don't know, I get ads for, has everyone got the ad for Udi lately? This is one that seems to come up in my feed the most. It's one of those, giant hooded blankets that you can cuddle in under the couch so you stay warm and cozy when you're having to stay at home all the time. Or you get ads for all kinds of random things and things that make you laugh or that you might actually need. But this is a problem when we're exposed to advertising that comes from things that are meant to harm us, like the tobacco industry, junk food industries, we could go on and on. But obviously the focus of this conference is on the tobacco industry. And to me, this is a huge problem, particularly when the audience is young people. And if we don't discuss the role that the tobacco industry plays in the tobacco epidemic and the number of deaths that are happening, the millions and millions, I believe the stat now is projected to be 8 million people per year will die as a result of their tobacco use. We're neglecting to discuss the industry's role as a disease vector in the tobacco epidemic is like refusing to discuss the role of mosquitoes in a malaria epidemic. From a public health perspective, it's imperative to go to the source of the problem. So we have to talk about the tobacco industry. And one of the most obvious places they're active is in advertising and promoting their products to young people. And today, that means on social media. I just really want to emphasize that when it comes to the tobacco industry, when tobacco control succeeds, the tobacco industry fails. There is no way for us to sit down and come up with a solution together that's going to make everyone happy. These products are addictive, and they're deadly, and they're sold to young people before they can even make, informed adult decisions about their health. There is no sort of win-win situation, which I know we've sort of been programmed to think like in public health. It's like, oh, we just got to sit down and negotiate, and, something can happen and good for everybody. And that all sounds lovely on paper, but that's not how it works. The primary goal of tobacco control is to prevent uptake, assist users to quit, and reduce exposure to secondhand smoke, whereas the tobacco industry wants to increase tobacco use, maintain current users, and prevent the erosion of smoking opportunities as restrictions are known to reduce smoking frequency. And this is embedded in the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. I'm not sure how much you've had on this so far, but there's no harm in repeating it because this is an incredibly important concept. And in the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, there is an article, Article 5.3, which says very clearly that we must protect public health policies from the tobacco industry. And one of the #1 areas the tobacco industry is active in is policies that are aimed at restricting how they can advertise their products. They want to be able to advertise their products. They want to be able to freely communicate with the public, with retailers, with politicians, whoever their target audience might be, to convince these people that their products are fun and safe and useful and that they're a good industry. And we need to have in place laws that dramatically reduce, restrict, and prevent, and in fact outright ban the tobacco industry from doing any sort of advertising, promotion, or sponsorship. And this must include on social media as well. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Christina Watts. I'll stop sharing my screen and she'll share hers. And she's going to take you through a whole host of examples of how the tobacco industry is exploiting social media because we haven't enacted adequate laws that ban them from using these platforms. Over to you, Christina.
Thanks, Becky, and hello everyone. It is really great to be with you all today. I must admit, I really wish that I could actually be there in person in Thailand and meet you all and collaborate together, but alas, we're in our countries. I'm meeting with you all from Sydney, Australia, so it's great that we obviously have technology, you can still engage with one another online. So yes, as Becky was saying, I'm going to just be taking you through some examples of tobacco industry campaigns and ways that they use social media, obviously for their own benefit. Social media, as we all know, rapidly evolves, and as does the tobacco industry. So some of the examples that I'm providing here today are sort of recent examples of what the industry has been doing, but it is really important to stay on top of what the industry is doing online, to make sure that we're one step ahead of their various tactics. So some of the types of promotions we see from tobacco companies on social media are paid ads, which I'll speak to in a little bit in a second. Also using social media influencers to covertly and sometimes, to be honest, quite overtly promote tobacco products or e-cigarettes and heated tobacco products. Sponsoring events and promoting these on social media and sort of building an online community around these events, and having tobacco industry corporate accounts. So these tobacco companies quite often set up these accounts to really promote corporate social responsibility and their various PR campaigns. So in regards to paid ads, social media channels like Facebook and Instagram do have self-adopted policies that don't allow the direct promotion of tobacco and vaping products. However, notice the emphasis here because it really points to a giant loophole that I'll speak to next. Only direct and paid advertisements of tobacco products and e-cigarette products are banned. I will actually circle back to this topic later in the presentation, as well, as we are seeing a new type of paid advertising coming from the industry today. So this giant loophole I speak about really is using social media influencers. Tobacco companies have repeatedly sought out various people, mostly young people who have significant numbers of followers online, and pay them to post photos featuring various tobacco products. And we've had evidence of them doing so with Marlboro and Lucky Strike and other various cigarette brands. Social media influencers have been shown to sort of actually have contracts set up with tobacco companies. And within these agreements and arrangements, they are trained on what sort of brands to promote, when to post particular pictures, and even are trained on how to post particular pictures to make sure that they look natural and don't look like paid ads. The Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids actually has done a really great investigation into this type of marketing activity. I have a link on the slide there that has a whole library of different examples of this type of marketing. So I really encourage you to check it out. But as part of their investigation, they found that in Italy, influencers were paid to promote Lucky Strike cigarettes and were actually instructed to hide cigarette health warnings. So you can see in the picture there, the one at the top, the guy's holding the cigarette pack and very clearly hiding the health warning on the packet there. So very sneaky. Influencers are also often instructed to include specific hashtags when promoting their products on social media. And in the next slide here, you can see sort of some examples of these hashtags. So British American Tobacco has proven to also use this type of tobacco advertising, specifically in regards to their product Blow, which is a heated tobacco product, and Vipe, which has now been rebranded as Buse, which is an e-cigarette. And the picture on the right there, you can see that they've got very carefully crafted hashtags like Vipe, Charge Beyond, and Make the Switch. So, these hashtags are clearly not being developed by the person that's posting it. They've been told to use these in particular. And Philip Morris as well has been very much using this strategy in promoting IQOS, which is their heated tobacco product. Now, I'm going to see if I can just share a video that will show, it's a Reuters investigation that will give you a bit more of a snapshot into this type of activity. Oh, you know what, I just got to unshare for a second because I realized that I did not share my slides. Sorry, my sound. Sorry. Okay.
Maker Philip Morris International has suspended a global social media marketing campaign that used young online personalities to sell its heated tobacco device known as IQOS, an acronym for I Quit Ordinary Smoking. The move announced Friday came after Reuters was probing the company's marketing standards. Philip Morris claims to have a strict policy of not promoting tobacco products using young celebrities or models who are or appear to be under the age of 25. Yet, a Reuters investigation revealed the company had used young social media ambassadors in Japan, Italy, Switzerland, Russia, and Romania to market its IQOS device. Like 21-year-old Russian influencer Alina Tapolina, her Instagram profile shows her living the high life alongside a picture of her with the IQOS. Reuters correspondent Chris Kirkham.
You know, when you look at the posts, they have a lot of information that indicates that this was, this was essentially a paid post. There's hashtags that say things like paid ad or not risk-free, adults only, which is the kind of disclaimer language that you'll see when a company is heavily involved in sort of developing the language on these Instagram posts.
Tapolina and 9 other IQOS influencers, some of whom have tens of thousands of followers, did not respond to requests for comment. On Friday, the company said, quote, "We have taken the decision to suspend all of our product-related digital influencer actions globally," adding, quote, "No laws were broken."
I think the question is not necessarily about what's legal or not. It's kind of more of just a question of what is the perception, what are these images evoking, and what kind of impact could that have, and is it in the spirit of what they've been talking about, which is we don't want any young people using our products.
All right, I might just leave it there. So Juul as well has proven to take some lessons out of the tobacco industry's playbook when it comes to advertising its products online and to young people. So a series of studies from Stanford University showed how Juul really exploited social media, targeting a youth market. And as you can see on the slide here, this is just an example of one of the images which was used in the early campaign that Juul ran called Vaporized. It obviously is using very youth-oriented imagery here, and even though the company Juul says that they were not intending to market to youth, the evidence is obviously in the imagery. There actually was a quote at the time from people somebody who had worked at Juul, and they say, "We have never marketed to youth and we never will." And they said that this campaign specifically was intended for adult smokers aged 25 to 34, which is quite laughable really when you look at that imagery. I think anybody can clearly see that that is not, it is clearly marketed at a younger audience. And, even this image of Ariana Grande, who is clearly a big pop star amongst young people, such similarities in the imagery there. Now, to give you an example from the region, so from Indonesia, this case study explores how social media and the internet have been used to support traditional tobacco marketing in Indonesia, so specifically around sponsoring events. So it looked at the brand, and I apologise to the Indonesians here, I probably have terrible pronunciation, but Sampurna A, and their sponsorship of a music concert series. and the various marketing content surrounding those music festivals. So in regards to social media, the investigation found that concert goers were encouraged to make social media posts with various hashtags. And you can see on the slide there, taken from this particular paper, various hashtags were used, the top one being Soundrenalin 2016. And all up, all those 10 different hashtags from their festival resulted in about over 65,000 posts on social media. And the other image that I've got on the slide there from the paper shows the various posts that were associated with these hashtags, many of which showed actual cigarette packs, including the limited edition A-mild cigarette packs, as well as logos and branding and slogans of the tobacco brand. So really these findings showed that the tobacco industry was effectively engaging and grooming their target audience through social media by creating an online brand community. And in another study from Indonesia, tobacco companies were also directing consumers from within retail outlets to online marketing through 2 primary hashtags displayed at the point of sale, as well as a company website. So these promotional materials in retail outlets with these hashtags that are directing people online also included images of young people sort of having fun together. One of these hashtags linked to the official Instagram account for ProJam, an event sponsored by an Indonesian tobacco company. So this is another key example of tobacco industry sponsorship, and you may have heard of Mission Winnow before. If you haven't, it's essentially a brand created by Philip Morris International to sponsor the Ferrari Formula One events, the Ferrari team in the Formula One events around the world. It is a different form of advertising. So because I noted earlier in the presentation, Facebook and Instagram don't allow direct tobacco ads, one of the key ways that Philip Morris and our various other tobacco companies get around that sort of those sort of laws and self-adopted bans is to change the way that they're promoting. So a lot of their communications online now and paid advertisements come through these sort of under the banner of corporate communications. And this is just one of those examples. So of course, the Mission Winnow campaign also has a strong social media presence. The Instagram page here has over 40 or close to 45,000 followers. And, they've also got competitions that they're running as well, which all is legal and okay because it falls under this sort of corporate communications. So this is, I guess, a good segue into the sort of next phase of this presentation, looking at some of the new ways that the tobacco industry is promoting and their various new strategies. And I'm sure you've spoken about a lot of this today already. Tobacco companies, and I must say Philip Morris International in particular, have a long-standing agenda of promoting socially responsible initiatives, and more recently are positioning the industry as part of the solution to reducing the burden of tobacco. And in recent years, this has very much proliferated. The image here was taken off the Philip Morris International website just this week, and it really promotes this idea that Philip Morris has been transformed and they have a clear goal of delivering a smoke-free future. And as part of this sort of overarching strategy is their Unsmoke campaign, which is very heavily promoted on social media in countries around the world. Their tagline for this campaign is, if you don't smoke, don't start. If you smoke, quit. If you don't quit, then what? And I'm sure, you can all see through this already, but essentially, if this tagline is actually realised, then the company would have killed off its own business within the next 50 years or so. The reality is that the industry obviously needs to create new users for its product moving forward, and in order to remain sustainable financially into the future, they really want to achieve a new consumer pool of addicted nicotine users. And so with these sort of Unsmoke campaigns going on around the world, there obviously is a clear social media presence. This is the Unsmoke Instagram account, which is a global Instagram account, but there have been actually some national Unsmoke Instagram and Facebook accounts as well. So I encourage you, whatever country you're in, to check out and see if the Unsmoke campaign is running in your region. I did say at the very beginning of the presentation, I would circle back to paid ads. And like I was talking about with sponsorship, the key way that tobacco companies get skirt this policy around direct tobacco advertising is to, again, really promote ads under this corporate communications banner, and quite often around political marketing. So this particular post, as just an example, was taken off the Facebook ad library. Philip Morris International put money behind this ad and promoted it on Facebook. And it's really basically looking at the government regulation and creating doubt around government's use of science in order to regulate certain products, ultimately with the aim of wanting to loosen tobacco control and e-cigarette laws. This particular ad had a potential reach of over 1 million people, and as you can see in the graph there, it was shown primarily to 25 to 34-year-olds. So a study that Becky and colleagues did actually analysed a month of posts on the Australian Philip Morris International page on Facebook. So on Facebook, Philip Morris International has a global page that has 1.4 million likes. However, depending on where you live, when you look at that page, it'll have tailored content to your region. So for Australia, this particular study found that the majority of posts were really used to lobby for the relaxation of regulations that prevent the sale of IQOS within Australia. And so the image that you can see on the slide there is just an example of these sorts of posts that Philip Morris promotes to undermine our tobacco control laws. So the industry's image as a good corporate citizen is really a significant component of the tobacco industry's public relations strategy. And corporate social responsibility is in itself generally thought as a key area of tobacco marketing, and it actually falls within the scope of the FCTC Article 13. And I know I've spoken a lot about Philip Morris already, but it's not just limited to Philip Morris's activities. British American Tobacco and Imperial and Japan Tobacco and many other companies are also going down this line as well. British American Tobacco has said, we have a long tradition of operating to the highest standards of corporate conduct and transparency, which is quite laughable really when you consider the deception and manipulation that we've seen from them in the past. So this particular study that Becky and I worked on analysed the public messaging of British American Tobacco, Imperial Brands, Philip Morris and Japan Tobacco on their corporate Twitter accounts. And what we found were that these companies are really using Twitter to communicate to the public in regards to being socially and environmentally responsible, really portraying themselves as highly favourable employers, and also another key area was sort of opposing tobacco control policies. And to give you some examples of these corporate social responsibility posts, this one here from British American Tobacco has really promoted that they've apparently planted 140 million trees between 2007 and 2012. And these sorts of tweets are actually quite misleading, given that tobacco growing and curing is a major cause of deforestation around the world. And similarly, the tweet here from Japan Tobacco International is promoting sort of getting children from fields to classrooms. Yet, I'm sure many of you are aware that, again, tobacco growing and curing also uses children as employees as well. And in 2011, there was estimated to be 1.3 million children a year working in tobacco fields. And another example from Philip Morris saying that they're giving back to the community by donating local gifts to local organisations that help vulnerable youth. And it's not limited to just tobacco products. You know, obviously Vuse is a British American tobacco brand, and we're now seeing this sort of corporate social responsibility advertising being brought across into the e-cigarette space. Obviously, this is a way to actually promote the products, but also come across as being very socially responsible by saying that Vuse is the first carbon neutral vape brand. And this particular advertising was even plastered across the sails of a yacht through the Thames River in London. And of course, with all these sort of marketing activations, it's very much plastered across social media as well, as you can see from British American Tobacco promoting this on Twitter. So as noted earlier, in the study that had looked at Facebook's, Philip Morris International's page on Facebook, that study also found that a lot of these posts really are talking about sort of how good these companies are in terms of employment benefits. And the Twitter study also found that. In February 2019, Philip Morris was actually awarded from the Australian federal government the Employer of Choice for Gender Equality. And so you can see the post there from Philip Morris International, which is quite outrageous, really, given the history of the tobacco industry directing marketing at women for many years. Often tobacco companies are awarded these employment, well, they're given these employment awards, and they're not actually, they don't have any standing. So this particular post from British American Tobacco saying that they were rated as a top employer, through further investigation of what this top employment award was, essentially it was a for-profit company that companies just needed to fill out a form and pay some money, and then all of a sudden they were a top employer. So obviously that has great PR benefits for these tobacco companies to then splash around social media that they're a wonderful employer. Now, we couldn't possibly get through a presentation that in this period of time without talking about COVID-19, but the tobacco companies have, of course, exploited the pandemic for their corporate gain. The Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids have analysed the marketing tactics of tobacco companies and e-cigarette companies as well in countries around the world, and found that on social media, Philip Morris and British American Tobacco used stay-at-home hashtags to market heated tobacco products and e-cigarettes. Some brands in particular have even used influencers to promote brands using branded masks, like you can see in the image here. In Kazakhstan, British American Tobacco provided Glow branded masks to more than a dozen Instagram influencers who posted photos like this, wearing the masks with captions advertising free Glow masks with Glow masks with the purchase of a Glow device. And this obviously is all very rich, coming from an industry that you know, is promoting a product that has actually resulted in smokers being very vulnerable to COVID-19, noting that smoking increases the risk of respiratory infections and weakens the immune system. And if you haven't heard of Moira Gilchrist before, she's very vocal on Twitter, the Vice President of Philip Morris International, also getting in on the COVID-19 pandemic, noting that, you know, in this time we should all be very nice together, nice to each other online, which is quite ironic and laughable, considering that Philip Morris and Moira herself are massive spreaders of misinformation, and all of a sudden is telling everybody else to play nice. And British American Tobacco is also clearly reaping the benefits, the corporate image benefits of COVID-19 by claiming it's actually developing a COVID vaccine for the population, and of course promoting this online as well. So that of course has huge PR benefits for British American tobacco worldwide. And on that note, I'm going to pass back to Becky to talk about what is needed to regulate this sort of activity online.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Okay, great.
Yes.
All right. So thank you so much, Christina. That was such a whirlwind of all the horrible, terrible things the tobacco industry is doing online and social media. And in fact, it's actually just a really small slice of the examples. We could probably go through an entire day, of course, of all the things that are going on in this space. But I want to leave you now. I'm going to do two things. There's obviously the system response of like, what do we do about this? What can happen? But I also want to give you some really concrete tools as youth advocates, as people working either in tobacco control organizations or just people who have an interest, the kind of practical things you can do to push back against some of this stuff. So let's start with a sort of regulatory, what do we need governments, regulators to do? And obviously we need strong regulation of corporate behavior. We have Article 5.3, we have the FCTC, they're not being used to maximum effect. It seems really odd to me that we're able to regulate all other kinds of media platforms like newspapers, billboards, television, and say, the tobacco industry is not allowed to advertise on these platforms, but somehow we wring our hands and say, oh, social media, it's too big, it's too hard, we couldn't possibly regulate it. And I don't think that's true. I think that we've been led to believe that the social media platforms can just monitor themselves and do things themselves, and they need to be held to the same standard that the rest of the media industry is being held to. And in fact, the Framework Convention, as part of its ongoing management of Article 13, which is the tobacco advertising and promotion article, is currently updating its guidelines to say, explicitly that social media needs to be a part of that. And I'm part of that work as well. And so all this research I've been doing over the past few years alongside people like Christina is helping to feed into that, to make those changes. Obviously, self-regulation of these platforms, public health education, and policy-making partnerships are having really minimal impact. These things make people feel really good, and they make it feel like you're doing something, but they really, when you're sort of drowning in a sea of promotions, like we've just seen from Christina, it's too much. We need regulation. Voluntary regulations don't have any meaningful enforcement either. Education is drowned out by omnipresent product marketing, and policy-making partnerships result in regulations that heavily favor the industry rather than health. And so we need to, like I've just said, integrate this Article 5.3 into every policy, and not just tobacco control policies, but all policies across government, including media and broadcasting, treasury, etc. This doesn't just apply to a really narrow definition of public health. So now, what about you as individuals? What can you do? Well, I think one of the strongest things at the moment is to keep monitoring and tracking social media channels and that belong to the tobacco industry in your region. So if you know, for example, there's an Unsmoke page, an Unsmoke Instagram account, follow those people, follow those accounts. Keep track of the things you see. Report things that you feel are or go against the social media code. Keep track of those ads. If you come across ads on social media, report them. Also, start to build a library of examples of things you come across in your day-to-day social media use that have to do with tobacco. It'd be really putting those things together in a really simple one-page report, giving them to journalists and politicians is a really powerful advocacy tool. Nobody wants to see the tobacco industry targeting little kids or teenagers with these products. It's a really powerful tool to motivate politicians to act and to get journalists to be interested in this issue. We need to reverse the onus onto the companies, the social media companies in particular, to report on how they're enforcing their own policies and whether they're upholding their own values. And I think that's a really key advocacy lesson. Let's say you work for a small NGO, or you're part of a volunteer student group or whatever that's taking on tobacco. And a really clear angle you can put forth is like, look, we're a nonprofit, we're a volunteer organization. We're having to monitor social media platforms, monitor the tobacco industry. These are both multinational, multi-billion-dollar industries. And the onus has been put on us, who makes no money, to monitor to see if they're doing the right thing. And we need to shift that onus onto those companies that they have to report and prove that they are doing the right thing with transparency, including how much they're spending on social media, what their activities are, and disclosing that. And that actually does happen in some countries. Canada is a really good example that the industry is required to report on their marketing initiatives. Unfortunately, that information is not available for public scrutiny. It is reported to the government, but not in turn reported to the public. So those are just some sort of practical things going forward of how you can use what's happening on social media and use that outrage that we have and feel when we see all this advertising promotion, how you can use that in your advocacy initiatives. And I think I'll end that there. And I think we have maybe a minute or two for questions before we were taking a break.
All right, thank you so much.
I think you have your hand up there. I'll just unmute you. And I'm just going to stop sharing my screen too so I can see more of you.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Thank
please.
you, Dr. Freeman and Dr. Watts. I did have 2 questions about the presentation. My first question is the methodology of tracking hashtags by these brands, because sometimes, companies, they use very discrete hashtags. Like, for example, RJ Reynolds brand Velo, they would write hashtag Valentine's Day on some of their promo materials, but then it would be very hard to count all the posts within that hashtag. So like in research where we're trying to track down the social media influence of these brands, like, what would be the approach to do that?
My sound has seemed to have stopped working on me here. This is fair. I've tried to put it in the chat, but I don't have any sound coming anymore. Christina, can you
hear
take
you,
that one?
Becky?
Thank you.
Yeah, I can answer that one. I think there's a whole range of different approaches, and I'm actually at the moment looking at doing a similar study, looking at the Unsmoke pages, and I think looking back at the literature of what other people have done in the past is helpful. But yeah, it's not an easy one to answer because I think there's a whole range. I mean, you can obviously use different programs to download the associated posts of the content and do just a content analysis on them. You can just do a sample of the posts associated with those hashtags. I think obviously you've said that hashtag like Valentine's Day is going to have a huge number of posts associated with it. So it might, it's definitely going to be challenging, but I think there may even be other people might have more technical skills, but ways to take out keywords in sort of the back end of websites and things. But I definitely recommend having a look through other social media studies to check out their methods of what they've done.
Got it. Thank you. And my second question was about the increasing use of terms relating to health. So, for example, in your slides, you talked about this advertisement with the term carbon neutral, right, in their promotional language. And I think increasingly, I'm also seeing different tobacco products using language such as our products are vegan, our products are gluten-free, right? That's kind of a blurry line because it gives consumer the misperception of healthfulness. But you can't really say, you can't say that since it's true, right? It is gluten-free, right? So like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a really good observation. We're definitely seeing more of that. I think the tobacco industry, as part of their strategy to sort of promote themselves as being part of the solution and wanting this supposed smoke-free future, they're really trying to rebrand themselves as part of like part of the wellness industry, and so we're definitely seeing that more and more. I think it's really important, as Becky was saying, like in terms of monitoring, to really keep documenting that and really exposing sort of the truth behind some of these campaigns, that at the end of the day, these companies do not care about people's well-being or health, and it's purely a marketing exercise.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any other questions? I think I saw some previous posts about, but I believe that Dr. Freeman mentioned about this already. We do not have the power to control our social media platforms completely. There are many advertisements that we like or dislike. Is there any suggestion to keep that control within us? Any idea or any ways to go around that?
Hi, I'm back now. Can people hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. There's a question that I believe that you touched upon that already. Let me read that again. We don't.
Sure.
Although it is our own account, we do not have the power to control our social media platforms completely. There are many advertisements that we like or we dislike. Is there any suggestion to keep that control within us?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but are you saying to control what kind of ads we see or don't see? Is that what I think they're getting at? So your algorithm, essentially, of what's being fed to you by Facebook. I mean, obviously you can put in your ad settings that you don't want to see tobacco ads or you don't like certain things, and the algorithm will pick up on that. But you know, your average user, particularly people who are being targeted by the tobacco industry, is not going to do that. And a lot of the content that you'll see coming through will be through your social networks as well. Either you'll see something that a friend had liked or a friend had commented on, so it won't necessarily be direct. And the Facebook algorithm and Instagram, TikTok, you name it, any of these social media platforms, the algorithm is their most precious investment. They keep it very tight and very close and don't let you know how it's used. And that's for good reason, because they want to be able to control what ads are going through so they can make the most money as possible. And I liken to, if you've ever been to a restaurant with a friend, back when we could go to restaurants, when you could sit at a table and let's say your friend didn't turn up and for some reason they didn't have a phone, you couldn't reach them, but they're like, order me food and I'll join you in 10 minutes. And the first thing you do is go, oh, okay, I'm meeting my friend Bob. It's breakfast. Okay, so it's time of day. Oh, he's allergic to wheat. Oh, okay, so we're going to have this. Oh, and I remember the last time we were together, he mentioned he was on this diet, that he's not eating any, cheese or whatever. And so all those kind of things play into your mind to narrow down what you're going to order for your friend. And that's what the algorithm is like. It takes the time of day, what you've looked at before, who all your friends are. It knows your sort of other behaviors. And it profiles whether they think that you should be getting certain kinds of ads, and that includes tobacco.
Okay, I think that's a very clear answer to that. I think it is time for us to break a bit. And Dr. Freeman, do you mind giving us a little bit of intro to the session that's coming up in an hour? What's going to happen?
Absolutely. So I'll be joined by two other colleagues, Dr. James Kite and Ms. Lillian Chen, and we're going to be talking about how public health people can use social media better for effective tobacco control. So we've shown you the dark side, how the tobacco industry is using these platforms, and now we're going to talk about, is there a place for good? Can these platforms actually be used to advance tobacco control? Can they help us meet our goals? And that's what we're going to be talking about in the next session.
All right, thank you so much. And it's time for a 1 hour break. We will come back in about an hour to continue to this interesting session, so stay tuned. If there's any question, again, you can put in the chat box and we'll be monitoring everything, and we'll come back in an hour. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.